Species. Unite.
I think there's a lot of people out there who feel the way I felt for many years, which is, look, I feel a bit guilty about, like, I know in some sense that having the diet I have makes me complicit in some things that I don't like. It makes me a bit uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel like there's anything I can do about it right now. I have this guilt. I'd like to do something about it, but just all the options I'm presented with seem a bit shit. So when we present people with something else that they can do, many of the people we've spoken to, it's quite a relief to know that they don't have to sit with this tension. Psychologists call it the meat paradox, the thing where we love animals, but we also eat them. How can we resolve this? One thing that can maybe help us resolve this kind of cognitive dissonance is to actually be a part of helping animals, even whilst you're still, haven't changed your diet.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. The animals that need our help the most are animals that live on factory farms. Yet charities protecting farmed animals receive 28 times less donations than pet charities. There are all sorts of reasons for this, which we will get into in this episode. This conversation is with Aidan Alexander and Thom Norman. Aidan and Thom have started an organization called FarmKind. It is a way to support your favorite charities. That is nonprofits that you already are supporting, pet charities, conservation charities, etc. But also at the same time to help animals that are living on factory farms. Welcome. How are you?
Great to be here.
Good. It's good to see you both. So why don't we start with each of you introducing yourselves, and then we'll get into FarmKind.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So my name's Thom. I'm one of the co-founders of FarmKind. We started very recently, but before this, I used to be a lawyer working in the UK government.
I'm Aidan, the other half of FarmKind. I, before we were doing this, used to work at a charity incubator, which is confusing. So I'll go one job further back to something that people might know what it means. Before that, I worked at Uber doing kind of like strategy and operations sort of things.
Okay, but you're going to now have to tell everybody what a charity incubator is.
Okay, fine. It's this organization that tries to get really impactful new charities started by doing a bunch of research to figure out what would be a really impactful charity that doesn't currently exist, and how can we find some great people to start it? And then it kind of runs a program that teaches them everything they need to kind of go off into the world and start an organization.
And then do you support them while they're early stages, or?
A little bit, but it's mostly kind of like,
them?
Push them off the ledge, hope that they can fly sort of thing.
Let's say what FarmKind is first before we take it apart, obviously. So what is it?
So FarmKind, we are an organization that exists to try to help some of the best charities that work specifically on factory farming, support them by finding new donors for them. Basically, the way it works is many people love animals, right? And they maybe support their local shelter, or they support maybe the ASPCA or WWF, some of these charities that are working to help the lives of particularly companion animals or maybe wild animals and conservation work. Some really great work. But only a very tiny fraction of the current donations that go towards helping animals go to factory farmed animals or farmed animals in general. So if you take just animals that people look after, so animal welfare, so putting conservation work to the side, about 97% of the donations go to companion animals. And there are roughly speaking, 800 million dogs, 600 million cats in the world. There are 100 billion farmed animals, and they're getting less than 3% because some of that also goes to things like lab testing charities as well. So less than 3% of all the donations for 100 billion animals. So what we say to people is not you're donating in the wrong way, or your choice is somehow invalid, but why don't you, as well as supporting the charities that you already love and you already care about, support these charities that we have done work with experts to find that are particularly good charities working on farmed animals, and do both. The way it works is you come onto our website and you pick like your favorite charity, so one you already support, for example, something that's really close to your heart, maybe your local shelter. And then we have a set of 6 really great farmed animal charities. You can pick one of those, or you can just click a button and donate to all of them at once, make it nice and easy if you don't want to kind of do the research yourself. When you put your donation forward, you split it between these 2 charities. And what we do is we boost your donation. So the more of your donation you give to our recommended charities, the bigger a boost we'll give to both sides of your donation. So both your favorite charity will get more money, and the recommended charity will get more money from. And this comes from basically a pool of other donors who are already like really bought into supporting factory farm charities. They give their donation through us to sort of encourage other people to continue to donate. And so this whole kind of cycle can kind of go well, and we can have more people donating to help factory farmed animals, because ultimately donating to charities is one of the best ways to have a positive impact in the lives of these animals.
I just want people to really get the whole grasp of this. And first, I want to go back to numbers, because like you said, only 3% of money that goes to animals goes to farmed animals. And I think this is US stats, but US is kind of the big givers of the world. Of all giving in the United States, only 3% goes to animal charities to begin with, right?
Not just animals. If I recall correctly, it's 3% goes to animals and environmental charities
yes,
combined.
Animals and climate.
Yes. And then of the stuff that goes just to animals, only 3% is going to farmed animals.
Yes, dogs and cats need help, etc. But a lot of money goes to kind of big dogs and cats organizations.
Yeah.
I want to go into like psychology and what's behind that. But I think in part is because people have dogs and cats and they can really relate. But what is keeping people from donating for farmed animals? Like, what's the barrier there?
I think that's a really good question. There's one simple thing, which is that when I talk to people about this, a lot of what they say is like, when I'm donating, I don't really know where my donations are going often, and I want my donations not to go to waste. I want them to be spent wisely. And one simple way to do that is to donate to something you can see. So you donate to, like, for example, your local shelter, and you can see how they're using the money, and you can see, I think that's a good use of money, right? So it comes back to this kind of like, we see the dogs and cats. The impact of your donation feels very close and very connected, and you feel like it's going in a good direction. Farmed animals is just very not there, right? The meat industry and the farmed animal industry spends quite a lot of time and money getting us not to look at it and not to think about what's going on. And so we can just feel very disconnected and very unsure of where our donations are going, which is one of the reasons why we think it's really important to work with experts to find really great charities. So you can have that trust that, like, actually, if you donate to these particular charities, you can be very confident that your donation is not being wasted and is being spent wisely. I think this is a really important piece. I think the other piece is simply that people don't realize just how much good they can do with their donations. So factory farming can feel like this really big overwork. So like the number of animals we've already mentioned, like 100 billion animals in the world, like about 10 billion animals in the US alone, can feel very overwhelming, like a really big problem. And people don't always realize just actually how much of a positive impact we can have. And I think that can be sometimes demotivating. And one of the things we like to talk about is actually the positive story of like how much good we've already done. The people working on this issue have only a tiny amount of money, as we've already said, and have actually already made some really big steps in the right direction. And there's more we can do. But it's actually quite an exciting and uplifting message, which is like, on these tiny budgets, we've done all this. Imagine what we could do with a bit more money.
Also, I think for a lot of people, especially people who aren't directly fighting this stuff or very involved in it or vegan, they think of farmed animals, factory farmed animals, they're going to die. I can't really help them. I don't think a lot of people go beyond that. And they still have lives before they die that are pretty horrific. And so will you talk about like some of the organizations, the impactful charities?
Yeah, for sure. So the 6 recommended charities we have, they all do something to combat this problem of factory farming in different ways. And one of the ways, as you mentioned, is kind of helping the animals that are already in the system, that they're going to live, they're going to die. Can we make their lives better? And one of the charities we recommend that does a really good job of this is called the Humane League. And they do a number of things, but one of the things we're most excited about that they do is they put pressure on big corporations to phase out the cruelest practices from their supply chains. And so an example of this is, people might have heard of battery cages, which is a name for these very, very small cages that many chickens who lay eggs spend their lives in. They spend their whole lives with the size, an area the size of an A4 piece of paper to stand on. It's not a lot of space, and they never get to open their wings. So not a great time at all, to put it lightly. And what the Humane League does is they try and many people don't know that when they're buying eggs from a big brand, that this is where their eggs are coming from. And Humane League brings this to consumers' attention. And, understandably, when people know this, they are a bit less excited about shopping from those brands. And so it puts pressure on companies to actually meet their customers' expectations. And so they've seen massive companies like, KFC and PepsiCo and Walmart and so forth commit to phasing out practices like keeping chickens in battery cages so that they can have a cage-free existence. And it's just unbelievable how much good they're able to do with just a little bit of money. So, for example, they can get one chicken prevent a chicken spending a life in one of these cages for just 85 cents. And it's a pretty remarkable difference for that animal compared to, caring for animals directly in a shelter, let's say, is important work, but it's very resource intensive. And the good thing about the work that the Humane League does is it's kind of scalable. You work at a systemic level by going after an entire organization, and you get the benefit of helping all of the animals that are affected by their work.
And the future animals.
Yes. And I know it sounds like this very incremental, we're just helping kind of one animal at a time. But when you then take a step back and look at how much progress they've made over 15 plus years that the Humane League has been working on this. In the US, for example, in the last 10 years, we've seen an increase from 10% of chickens living outside of these battery cage systems to over 40% now. And we can't obviously, give the Humane League all the credit for that, but they've been one of the driving forces behind this transformation. So it's not just little incremental change. It can be a part of changing a big system.
I think just call me out if I'm wrong, but I think another thing that keeps people from donating to farmed animal organizations, there's something in the ether, the zeitgeist, that if you're not vegan, then that's not your world. Will you talk about the psychology there?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I can definitely kind of relate to firsthand. I grew up, a big meat eater, and we'll always love steak, and I also loved animals. And if I would ever somebody would appeal to me to kind of put reckon with this kind of disconnect, it would kind of make me feel like, I can't be a part of helping these animals so long as I have this other thing that I'm doing, which is eating them. And I think that that just doesn't need to be the case. And that's something that I have come to be really quite passionate about. Anyone can be a part of solving this problem. You don't have to be 100% one way or 100% the other. And for many people, changing diet is just too difficult, or they, for health reasons, or there's a myriad of reasons why people either will be unable or unwilling to change their diet. But the great thing about donating is that basically anybody can do it. It's far easier. And it also has some other kind of surprising benefits too, because, even when I started thinking about the power of donations, I would have thought, well, yeah, donations are great, but compared to diet change, it's still, not that great. Donations can be really powerful because when it comes to diet change, you can only help so many animals, which is the number of animals that you would have been impacted by your diet. But with donating, there's kind of no theoretical limit to how many animals you can help. You can do as much good as living, 100 or 1,000 years of veganism or something like that.
Right.
So that gets me very excited.
Right. Do you find that in talking to people that, I know you guys are very new, you've been around for 3 months.
That's about right, yeah.
But in talking to people that have donated or are really excited about what you're doing, do you find that is a driver, a way to bring people in, meat eaters or people who just, it's not their world. They're not, paying attention to farmed animals. Hey, if you donate, it kind of evens you out a little bit, right? It assuages some guilt.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got a lot of kind of positive reception to this idea because I think there's a lot of people out there who feel the way I felt for many years, which is, look, I feel a bit guilty about, I know in some sense that having the diet I have makes me complicit in some things that I don't like. It makes me a bit uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel like there's anything I can do about it right now. I have this guilt. I'd like to do something about it, but just all the options I'm presented with seem a bit shit. So when we present people with something else that they can do, many of the people we've spoken to, it's quite a relief to know that they don't have to sit with this tension. Psychologists call it the meat paradox, the thing where we love animals, but we also eat them. How can we resolve this? One thing that can maybe help us resolve this kind of cognitive dissonance is to actually be a part of helping animals, even whilst you're still, haven't changed your diet. So to make this even easier for people, because it's one thing to realize, I actually can donate and continue to keep my diet, but how much should I donate? When should I feel that, I've kind of balanced the slate or something like that? So we built a calculator for people to do exactly this, which we call the compassion calculator. And this took quite a bit of number crunching, but we look at all of the different charities that we recommend and how cost effectively they can help different types of animals. So how much good they can do for that animal for how much money, and then calculate for the average diet, how much would you need to donate to do as much good for these animals as if you kind of were to go vegan today. And we've also built it in such a way that you can kind of fiddle around with it and feed it exactly your diet, and it can be tailored to you. How much would you need to donate to do as much good for animals?
I was looking around at it this morning, and you can put I'm an omnivore or I'm a pescatarian.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that shocks people. Yeah. Some people
it's really cheap.
Have a bit of disbelief about it. Because, so for the average, we looked at an average diet across the US and Canada and the UK and stuff like that. And for that omnivore diet to kind of offset it, kind of like carbon offsetting, it would be $23 a month, which, so really blows people away. And they wonder, kind of how is this possible? Yeah. But it's because of examples like the Humane League being able to, free a chicken from a cage for 85 cents. It's not that there isn't an awful amount of good that needs to be done to balance your diet. It's that these charities can do it so efficiently that it doesn't end up costing all that much.
It's so weird because I talked to you guys yesterday, and then this morning, randomly, I was in an Uber going somewhere, and I was on Instagram. Most of my Instagram is really bad things happening to animals, unfortunately.
Yeah.
A lot of it. And I saw these horses that were getting sent to Canada to slaughter, and they were it's just horrible video. And this organization that helps them was we need donations right this second. For some reason, they were especially horrific. And I was get them, send them $50. Right? And in this, I wasn't thinking about you two at all. And I did. And I was oh, no, I don't have to think about those horses anymore for right now. And I don't mean to sound crass and cold. I think about animals all the day long.
Yeah.
But it literally was oh, okay. And then I was oh my God, this is what you guys were talking about.
Yeah.
It literally was oh, that took the guilt out. It's horrible what's happening to animals. And I'm not trying to belittle it at all. But there is a thing if I can help right here, I don't have to pay attention to that. And I didn't have time to pay attention to that right this second. But I can help right here and do something that's really proactive. Yeah. But when you said it yesterday, I got it intellectually, and somehow I experienced it this morning.
I think particularly for those of us who really love animals, it can be very difficult to deal with when we're trying to think about this issue, right? Because we have this innate compassion, very strong compassion for animals, and then actually seeing what's happening to animals in factory farms can be really, really upsetting. And I guess we have two choices. We can put it to the side. We can try and put it to the side and pretend it's not happening, or we can take these actually really simple steps that and then also allow us to stop having to think about this too much and relieve those feelings of upset and complicity, but have also made the lives of those animals better,
Yeah.
And I think that's the crucial thing is you don't have to spend all day thinking about it, but you can also do a really profoundly large amount of good.
And by being able to do something, and even if it's $20 a month, then you can look because you're doing something.
Yeah,
versus
absolutely.
Most people who don't want to look, it's too much. They don't want any of it because then I would have to think about it.
Yes.
But then it just gives you permission to look without having to change your whole life or I'm going to be this animal rights warrior now. It allows you in the door. And this is what the biggest problem, I think, with the entire animal movement has been for years or decades. You can't get in unless you're a card-carrying member and you're vegan.
Yeah.
That's the psychology of it.
Yeah.
And this is just saying, hey, you can do this much or $20 or go vegan, but all of it is we're pushing the needle. And we are going to end factory farming.
It's like if you care about, global poverty, for example, right? You might become an aid worker and move to Africa and stuff. Like that's a good thing to do. But 99% of people who care about this issue, what they do is they set up a donation to a charity that they think is doing some good work and they move on with their life. And it's not their identity, they don't build their life around it. And yet it's a thing that they care about and it's a thing that they do something to help, right? And like, it's just funny in the animal space where we don't really celebrate those people, right? Yeah. It's like you're either kind of all in or like you don't.
No, you either have like transformed your career. Yeah. Everything you do is about like not harming animals, or you're not allowed. You're just like, you're not in.
And if we just celebrated that way of engaging, that way of making a difference and then moving on with your life much more, I think we would, we would do so much more for them. Yeah. It's so important.
I think as well, just being a member of the globalized society that we live in, if you really start paying attention to just what it means to be a consumer, you end up realizing you're complicit in a lot of dark stuff that you didn't want to know about,
Absolutely.
And it can just feel like, how can I possibly like address all of this? And, actually going and solving the problem yourself. There are too many problems. We have to prioritize. And even, trying to, if you wanted to change the way you are a consumer in the world to be completely, pure, so to speak, you'd have to go and live like as a hermit off grid. It's just not viable.
You can't do it.
So I think that finding the way that the kind of lowest effort way that can help people deal with some of these issues is really important, and particularly one kind of as big as this one. This is like, for many people, it's the issue that they think about the least because just how heavily it would weigh upon them if they did. Right. So I think being able to take that weight off of people seems really valuable. And I definitely resonate with what you were saying about your experience with that kind of horse video, because, no matter what, knowing that factory farming is currently the system that we're living with is not going to feel good. But it feels different looking at it with a sense of, it's one thing to look at it and know that this is happening, you're potentially a part of it, and that's it. Yeah. You're not doing anything. Yeah. And it's another to look at it and say, this is horrible, and I'm doing my bit to end it. It doesn't make the problem go away mentally, but it does make a world of difference. At least that's how I feel.
It makes a world of difference. And what I learned this morning, just by being in the moment of what you guys, the psychology, it allows you access to places your brain wouldn't really let you access.
Yeah, it's quite liberating, right? Being able to think about this thing now.
Yeah, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, if I give $50, 25 and 25 one goes to my charity, one goes to Humane League, and then this extra money comes in, right? Is that money that comes in also from donors that donate to a pool?
Yeah, what we're starting to see is that when people have been brought into this issue, in part because of the promise of having their donation boosted with some of these funds, they're quite grateful, understandably. And many of them say, this is a great idea, and I want to kind of like pay forward what I received. And they decide, for my next donation, instead of donating the same way and getting a bonus, I'm going to contribute to the fund that then gives others a bonus. So it's kind of this like virtuous cycle of giving where some people are incentivized to give by others.
People, I think, like to see like, wow, now I'm giving more. It works, right?
Yes.
Like people enjoy giving when then more comes in to give.
Yes. And I think especially because whilst each individual donation can be really impactful, people still have a sense of, it's this big problem, and if we want to solve it, we need to kind of all do it together. So I think a lot of people are excited about not just, making their own personal contribution, but doing it in such a way that brings others in and makes this movement to solve this problem even bigger.
And so how's it going?
We launched our website just about 3 months ago, at the beginning of August. We've been kind of trying things out. We did some research that was covered by Forbes on how many animals actually are raised in what we think of as like the traditional farm. So, that small little farm. They're about, the really short answer is almost none of them. 78%, this is using US agricultural data, so government data. 78% of farms are small farms. So they're probably something like what you think of when you imagine a farm in your mind. But they raise just 0.1% of all the farmed animals in the US. Whereas the 2% of the largest farms, what we call mega farms, so like the most animals. Yeah, well, you have these even just the biggest factory farms, not even just all factory farms. There are smaller factory farms too. So these mega farms, the really biggest farms, there's only about make up 2% of total farms, but they're raising about 98% of the animals in the country. It's absolutely crazy. It's particularly a bad problem for the smaller animals like chickens and pigs. A little bit less so for cows. But so we did some research on this and had that published and things. And we're doing various outreach efforts, coming on podcasts like this to talk to people and try and spread the message. So far, the donors who've donated through FarmKind have helped 3 million animals, which is an amazing start for 3 months.
Even though it sounds so like ridiculously overwhelming, 80 billion farmed animals and trillions of fish, but the numbers of like, wait, you're helping this many animals by donating $30, it starts making them real animals, as opposed to it's so easy to put them over here. 3 million is a lot of animals in 3 months. And I think this is the kind of thing, clearly, like the more people start donating this way, the more it's like exponential, right? It just keeps giving. Right?
Yeah, there's so many more. Yeah, so much more we could be doing. And I think it's like, to your point about we often use these numbers because we want to express that this is a big problem, right? And like something we really need to do something about. It is important to remember each of these are individual animals as well, right? And they each have their own life and their own experience of the world. And like I always think. So I have 2 cats, and they're very much individuals to me, right? They have their particular personality. Luna and Sirius, they have their particular personalities. Luna's like, the quiet one, and Sirius is this sort of like almost dog-like guy who just kind of always wants to play, but he never knows where the line is. And like the thing is, the pigs in the farms and things, and the chickens and things, they are also individuals with like similarly with personalities, and like if you did get to know them, they would also have these like different quirky but like things about them and like all these sorts of things. And I think that like it is important, like while the big numbers are also important, it is also important to remember that like these are all individuals, and they would have these amazing rich lives if we set things up to give them the opportunity to do that. And that's like, for me, that's one of the things that motivates the work that we do.
Well, and I think too, by somehow changing that narrative that you don't have to become like a hardcore vegan to care about this stuff, and you don't have to become an animal rights person to want to help this stuff, and all of those things that we're trying to change the narrative anyway. It helps people look more, and like hopefully that helps with the bigger picture of ending this stuff at some point, right?
I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there who care about this issue, and some of them even have quite big platforms. They have a lot of people that like to listen to what they have to say, and yet they choose not to speak to their audience about these issues because they worry that it's going to turn people away, because the way it's been spoken about in the past is so divisive. It's you either have to go all in and change your diet entirely, or you can't be a part of it. And one thing that I'm hopeful about is if we give folks like that something else that they can say that brings people in, that invites people to join them, rather than saying you have to jump over this massive hurdle or you can't come along. I think that's going to it's not just a way that we can, as FarmKind, try and bring people in, but it's an idea that we hope can inspire lots of people to start doing outreach to everybody that they know and bringing people along the journey.
It changes the narrative. Yeah. And that is what we've needed so badly for so long, is this narrative shift of like, it's okay to care.
Yeah. One thing that Thom pointed out to me, and I think it's really true, is that when it comes to caring about the environment, for example, for a long time, it was pushed upon you as consumers to solve this problem. Like it's your fault. You've got to fix it. I'm told, I haven't fact checked this, maybe one of the two of you knows, that the idea of the carbon footprint was coined by one of the oil companies. Is that right?
That's what I've been told too.
Yeah.
So. I think I was reading about it today. So BP was the company that really pushed this in like the early 2000s.
So that's got to make you stop and think, if they want us to frame it in this way as a matter of consumer choice, like maybe this is not the best way to solve the problem that, if we solve it, wouldn't be good for business, Yes. And I think that, the environmental movement has actually done a pretty good job of beginning to shift away from this is all about you, the consumer, and more to, hey, we have a system that is broken and we need systemic fixes. And, we as individuals only have so much leverage over that big system. But there are some big institutions, there are governments, there are corporations, there are really big non-government organizations out there that actually do have the power to change the system. So let's focus on that. And I think we should be doing the same when it comes to animals.
I mean, we barely have gotten factory farming and animal agriculture into the conversation about climate change. I think in order for that to happen, which there's definitely people pushing for it, but it's a big shift, right? You also need a consciousness shift. You need people to start saying, oh shit, factory farming is actually the worst thing happening on the planet right now. It pretty much is, right? Also, people have to realize like we have other options.
Yes.
And right now, if you look at the US where 98% of meat comes from factory farms, most people who aren't planning on going vegan don't really feel like they have other options.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that we need people to start to think of this as the biggest problem that there is, but that's not enough if they feel that it's futile.
And if they feel they can't even look at it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, shocked me is just to learn that the system that we think about as so entrenched in our society is actually really quite new. We only really began to mechanize some aspects of pig farming in like the 30s and then chicken farming in the 50s. And even that's just in the US where sadly the system began. But then when it comes to kind of it spreading globally, only, around the turn of the 21st century did it start to be exported truly around the world. And, whilst looking at this trend of factory farming spreading can be a bit bleak, it also makes me realize it was just not that long ago that we didn't have this system. If we didn't have it then, we can get there again. When I say that, a lot of people get excited about that, but other folks might be a bit skeptical and say, well, but we have, 8 billion people now. We had so many fewer people then. Like, how can we possibly feed them by going back to the old system? But I don't think we're advocating for kind of going backwards at all.
We need a whole new food system.
Yes, we need to transcend the system that we're in now, go forward to a new future that looks different. And that can involve, there are aspects about traditional farming that are, far kinder to animals, to people, to the planet than our current system. And so where possible, we should definitely bring some of that back. But there are also other alternatives. Yes. For example, just making some of the great alternative foods more available. There are many places where people would love to eat a healthy vegetarian meal, but it's just not on the menu. So one thing we can do is just put it on the menu, and some of the organizations that we support are doing that. And then there are others, if you're kind of a tech optimist, that are trying to develop these, new complementary foods of the future, so that the people who they want to eat steak exactly the way it is now, well, they will be able to, but without some of the same harms to animals, people, and the planet. So we're hopeful that, by coming at this issue in 3 main ways, by helping the animals in the system now, by making the existing alternatives more available now, and by developing the better alternatives of tomorrow, we can transform this whole system.
I hope so. But I think so. I mean, I fully believe so. I wouldn't be doing this if it was futile and hopeless. Thank you both for this. Thank you for what you're doing in terms of yes, money needs to go to these organizations in massive ways, but also in giving people permission to be a part of it that aren't fully in it. Is no one's really figured out how to do that very well, and you did. And so that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have this conversation. Cool. Thanks.
To learn more about FarmKind and to donate through FarmKind, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knutson, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polkey-Link, Sierra Dolan, Bethany Jones, and Anna Collner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.